The session of today has to do with paint management and the application of the theory of color on a piece of art. And first of all, we have to think of the materials that we need. Besides the paper or surface on which we are going to work, we are going to need plastic palettes like these ones. It could be bigger or smaller depending on the amount of colors you are going to use. We are going to use only 4 colors, and the paints, the type of paints that we are going to use today is finger paint. And here we have some examples of the paints that we could use for this work. We are going to need only orange, yellow, green, and red. And we need stiffed hair paint brushes like the ones we have here. They come in different sizes, as you see, depending on the size of the object that you are going to work on, or depending on what effects you want to achieve. And besides these materials, we need plastic knife and a little towel. The first step is to serve the colors on the palette. People commonly think that palettes are used or are created to mix colors. That is a mistake. Palettes are to serve colors and you use them as you need them. As soon as you take a little bit of paint and you put it in one of the holes of the palette, you clean the knife, the plastic knife, to avoid contamination of color. And you don't need a big amount of paint, because you are not going to paint a wall. You are going to do an experiment. Whenever you start to work on a special type of technique or materials, you have to make experiments first before you do something more complicated. When you buy a finger paint, it's better to buy the ones that are sold in independent cans. In this way you avoid problems in cans management. Now we have here the 4 colors that we are going to use. As we did before with color pencils, we are using opposite colors. Why opposite? Because they are going to produce the effect of darkness that we need, or natural shadows. It is possible to use black, definitely, but when one uses black, the effect is not as natural as when you use complementary or opposite colors. And here we have green and red, which are opposite colors. And I will divide the paper into 4 sections because I will not use the whole paper. And I use, as you see, the same brush to divide the paper into 4 sections. I do not need to be precise because as I told you before, this is an experiment. When one experiments, one does not worry for precision, accuracy. Okay, then here in this area I will do the apple again, and I will use this color to define where the apple is going to be. I define where the apple is going to be, and I know where I am going to paint. Why did I use yellow? Because it's the lightest color, so when you use other colors, any mistake is going to be covered. As well as we did with the other colors, with color pencils, previously, we start to cover the dark areas. Yes. And if you see, I am moving the brush in a certain way, and I'm putting the brush in a certain position. Which is the technique that Impressionist painters used at the end of the 19th century. And you start to take a little bit of all the colors to start to create the variations needed for this work. The most important thing is that you don't have to be afraid when you work with colors, but you have to be careful when you take the colors that you need, because you don't have to sink the brush within the paint. You have to take a little bit of paint and continue to work. And if you use the brush in the way I'm using it, do not press the brush on the surface. Just touch the surface. The purpose is not to destroy the brush. It is to paint. If it's to paint, do not press the brush on the surface. Do not try either to create a uniform area of color, because apples actually are not uniform in color. If you see them, they vary. They have variations of tonality. We can also use white for certain areas, which are the lightest ones. I'm going to pour here a little bit white. Do not use that enormous amount of white, because you are going to ruin your work. It is only for certain areas that are very enlightened. And we don't have to forget the stem. Here we have the stem of the apple. As I did before, when I used the color pencils, I started with green. Then I can use a little bit, very little bit red, and you will see what is going to happen when I put it on top of on green. And this is what happens when we mix opposite colors. You get darkness. The stiff hair paintbrushes help you to create certain effects. And here is the whole of the apple, so this area has to be darker. And it becomes lighter towards the upper part, so I will use orange. Lighten it, and then yellow. And to intensify the dark areas or shadows, we use green on top of red. This will help you to intensify the shadow and to create another color, which is the result of mixing opposites or complementary colors. The same can be done here on this area of the apple, which is supposed to be darker, even darker, not only red, not simply red. And this is why we have green here, because since green is the opposite of red, and we are not using black to produce shadows, we have to find another way. And the way is to use opposite colors. Whenever you do an experiment, you have to take only a bit of paint, especially if one does not know how to manage a technique or one is learning to manage a technique for the first time. Then the horizon line to create the sensation of surface, and now the shadow projected by the object on the surface. Because if the object is on a surface, it produces a shadow effect depending on where the source of light is. And our source of light comes from this side. If you have paid attention to the process, you would have noticed that I have not washed the brush. The brush does not need to be washed through the process. Some people think that whenever you use one color, whenever one uses one color, one has to go to the sink and wash the brush and then continue with the next color. That is not necessary. It depends on how you manage colors and the amount of colors you are using, and if you follow the process, the appropriate process. So here we have the result, which is the apple, and now I hope you experiment or try your own apple as an experiment. Thank you for your attention. This is Mr. Mejia from the Oxford School.